Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Reckless Optimist podcast. My name is Megan. I'm a family nurse practitioner with a deep passion for mental health. On this show, we showcase guests who have shown tenacity, grit, mental strength, and who embody the word resilience. A quick disclaimer before we start. This show is not a substitute for mental diagnosis or treatment. We do recommend that if you're struggling with your own emotional well-being, you see a mental health provider. I'm so excited that you guys are here. Let's get into it. Hey, everyone. Today on the podcast, we have Chris. I met Chris through mutual friends. He is an amazing guy. He shares his story tonight, kind of a wild story, twists and turns. He grew up in kind of that New York party scene in the 80s and 90s. Struggled with addiction, struggled with a lot of personal things. Ultimately, he was able to overcome all of those and is now thriving. He has a really cool business in New York where he helps people with chronic pain through different movements and modalities. And he is 10 years sober. So I know you guys are going to love his story tonight. Let's get into it. Hey, everyone. Help me welcome Chris to the podcast.
Hey, everybody.
I'm so excited that you are here. We were just talking before we jumped on about how me and you know each other through a mutual friend, Josh, who was on my show a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that was a great talk. I really enjoyed listening to both of you.
Yeah, so you guys met in New York because that's where you live now, correct?
Yeah, we met in recovery in New York about probably 8 years ago, give or take. And a mutual friend introduced us right outside of a meeting. And, we just two forces attracted and the rest is history.
I love that. What part of New York are you coming in from? Which borough?
Right now I'm in Brooklyn.
Okay.
In Greenpoint, but I'm looking over the East River as we speak. And in my building here, we have a little WeWork area. So I thought this was nicer than my apartment.
That's awesome. I love New York. I was just in New York in June. Love Brooklyn. I've been to New York a bunch of times. I flew up there when I was really young. My parents would just send me on a plane because my aunt and uncle lived up there. But to go back as an adult and do all the touristy things, Brooklyn has changed so much.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I've spent 26 years of my life, which is half my life, in New York City, and I've experienced very little of Brooklyn until I moved here last November, and now I love it because it's quieter. I've evolved and matured a little bit, so I enjoy the peace and quiet.
Yeah, for sure. New York's wild. The energy there, I don't know. When I walk the streets, I'm like, I can be somebody, you know?
That really is the draw. I mean, believe me, coming from the suburbs, raised in the suburbs of New York, and of course, you can get sucked into the suburb life, the small town mentality, and not have any aspirations. And that was also part of my story until I was just destined to come down here and be attracted to that energy. It's electric, and the intelligence and the money and this and that. It's wild.
Yeah, electric. That's a great way to describe it. Yeah. Well, we're going to start our episode out with the quote like we do each time. And the quote for your episode is anonymous. I don't know who said it, but I really liked it. So the quote goes, "Some people chase the high for years, never realizing the peace they've been searching for was always found in clarity." What does that quote mean to you?
Well, it's interesting that it's anonymous because I was curious about who said it. I look at podcasts and listening to people talk. Sometimes it's I think of the life as being a little futile and absurd, but I have an experience and I can draw from that experience and I can share that. And there's some power in that, especially if I'm able to transmit qualities that I've learned along the way. And so when I read that quote, the first thing is about chasing. And I like to kind of, distill things down to common denominators. But for me, I chased things my entire life, and I like New York City. Once I was exposed to it, it had an energy that made me feel comfortable because it was a distraction from really getting in touch with who I was. So I was always chasing masks, or I was always chasing a facade, and drinking and drugging and gambling in my story were low-hanging fruits. They did a very good job of keeping that chase going until it had no place else to go other than get better or maybe die. So the compulsive chase of my life that is meaningful to me because I understand even now that I don't drink or drug, and now I see that chase manifest in many other ways. And so, and what I've discovered as I have processed some of that, and as I kind of dug inward and acknowledged all of these things, all of these experiences, all of these feelings, we talk about the obsession to drink and drug has lifted. And the way I see it is those were kind of like symptoms. And what's lifting for me, if you've ever read the Four Agreements, that this fog is lifting. And that is what creates clarity. And now that I have that clarity, I'm less wounded and more wise, and I'm less compulsive and I'm more conscious. So the chase and that has such a diminishing returns. It's a non-sustainable thing, and it solved my problems at one point in time, and it stopped working. And it should be a label on everything that I chase that this will stop working one day. I'm starting to see things, the awareness, the perspective, and the wisdom. I'm starting to see and feel things for what they are, and I can accept that. And that is ultimately what's allowing me to breathe and, commiserate with other human beings without being such a burden.
Yeah. No, that was really well said. When I read this quote, I tracked with it a lot. For so long, I chased happiness, constant dopamine hits. And now that, yeah, I think with maturity, I've learned life is more about chasing peace and contentment. And that to me is if I have peace and contentment in my life, that's all I really need. I don't need all of that other stuff. And, also the other part of the quote is talking about clarity. And I think, when you get sober, that's like one of the best gifts you get back is to be able to have a clear mind. You're not inundating it with chemicals and altering substances. You're able to see clearly and you're able to authentically do things rather than these inauthentic things in your life. And that to me is such a beautiful gift.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm always amazed by people who have received that gift, the gift that keeps on giving. In the throes of addiction, I was always on a mission. I was like a mad dog. And now they talk about reversing those tracks and chasing your dreams or chasing your clarity of the same way we chase the other stuff. And I always laugh because that was lost on me, even in recovery for a very long period of time. I've come to realize that, people like yourself who we share those same ideas now, those virtues, those principles, that like it's possible because I struggled with connecting and identifying. And I was so judgmental for people that were improving or striving in certain directions. I felt left out. And so now I have a connection and a level of identification where it's like, yeah, exactly. Like, I'm on board and I want all those things for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm such a work, like, I guess if there was a theme, I really feel like a work in progress today,
Hmm.
rather than just a wasteoid. You know what I mean? Just a waste of life,
Yeah.
a lost soul.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I love how you said that. I also feel like I love what you said about connection. The opposite of addiction is connection. But I feel like when I was in active addiction, it almost like creates a selfishness in you. All you can think about is your own like thoughts. When's the next drink? When's the next drug? When's the next thing for you? But when you get sober, you're able to connect back with people around you and your environment. That connection is everywhere. And that's everything to me. Connecting with other people is literally one of the meanings of life?
Yeah, that was such a foreign concept to me. That was so lost on me. My arrogance and my ignorance. Um, were so strong that it wouldn't allow me to connect. And it's like I've now arrived,
Mhm.
and now I'm having my coming of age and my rite of passage in recovery
Mm.
instead of all the other nonsense that I thought was important. And I'm actually able to connect with another human being because I'm listening because that's what kind of bogged me down so much. And the fact that I was ignorant to a lot of my stuff is not an excuse. Life can be great and it could also be, very cruel. And I'm learning how it's up to me to get out of my own way. I was living such an arrogant and ignorant life, but it's not an excuse. And now that I'm more aware, it's like, wow, I'm supposed to be a good person or connect with others and add to society and be the best version of myself.
Yeah, yeah, I totally track with what you're saying. Well, I'm very excited to hear your story. So, wherever you feel comfortable, just take us back.
Okay, great. I've learned in retrospect, especially that as a little kid, whether it was nurture or nature, the chicken or the egg, whether it was past life, this life, was it too much love, too little love? What I do know is that when I was 3, which I don't have a recollection of, but there is video that when I went to nursery school, I was in hysterics, like bright red face, crying and clung to my mother's leg as she's dragging me into nursery school. And I'm 3 years old. And, I'm from a place called Rockland County, which is next to Westchester up the Hudson, half an hour outside of Manhattan. And, suburban life. I grew up in a middle of the income type of situation. And my father worked for IBM. My mother was like finding her way, and she was a late bloomer, and she ended up becoming successful in real estate later on. And my father retired early, but it was like I said, just an average household in the suburbs. And you know, when I look back at this home video, it tells me a lot about who I am and who I still am. Because when I was crying, and I've learned to take responsibility for my life today. And it's like ego or the disease. It's like that's me. Those are parts of me. We are victims of alcoholism, but that's kind of where the victimhood ends. I have to take responsibility for my life. And so I don't suffer from terminal uniqueness anymore. And, all the other usual suspects that I've come to learn, like perfectionism and paralysis by analysis and codependency and neediness and validation and all these things that I was talk about distractions and striving for and chasing. Those are the things that I chased before the drink and the drug. But I was, there's other kids crying at their first day of school, but I was a standout. Let's put it that way. And when I look at this, I'm like, I can't believe how bad I was, in hysterics. And so anyway, so you see the fear. And I'm like, yeah, my parents thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. It's funny, believe me. But now you fast forward to later in the day, and again, there's more video proof of what happened next. My father comes home from work and he says, "Hey, Christopher, I heard you cried at school today." And I'm kind of like looking at the ground and drawing my name in the dirt. And I look up at him and I go, "No." And I'm looking at this video and I'm saying, holy shit, that there I am. That's who I am today. And I realized that, the fear and the underdeveloped nature, maybe it was in my DNA or whatever it was from 0 to 3, that was who I was. I never changed. And I was always filling that void. And then I got caught up in, middle school and high school. And I was raised in an area that was like Friday Night Lights meets Dazed and Confused. And we looked up to the older people and the older brothers, and we did what they did. And it was diving off roofs of buildings into pools and doing bong hits and taking big funnels and driving our cars into the, local pond and just crazy stuff. And, we got hazed and beat up and were made to do all sorts of crazy stuff. And it was a rite of passage. It was, a sign of the times. It was a coming of age story. It was just accepted. And I didn't know that I was running from myself. And once I picked up the drink, it was just a great way to fuel and feed that existence. But I was that 3-year old scared that was just covering up as much as he could. And again, ignorant. And it was okay to be ignorant at the time. That, I guess I had an excuse at that age, but it's all part of my story. It's all part of my life. It's what led me to my bottom. But essentially, that 3-year-old boy went to, grade school and middle school and high school. And then he went to the world of New York City. And, I tried to, I did some acting and some modeling, and I was in the fitness business. And I tried all these things, and I partied my ass off, and I traveled the world trying to fill that void with many different things, whether it was girls or whether it was cigarettes or just whatever I had to do to get by. I went to a community college and my friend, we call it Harvard on the Hudson. It was Rockland Community College and it was just an extension of high school. We listened to reggae music and shot pool. It was like the Wild Wild West. I was like raised by wolves. We kind of raised each other and we were kind of like latchkey kids and the whole 80s generation never had like a really serious conversation with my folks because they was always telling me that what you're doing is bad and they didn't know how to emotionally support me. They did the best that they could. My father's father was an alcoholic. That particular gene skipped my sister, skipped my mother, but I kind of got the grade A strain and I got my parents sent me to a therapist and when I was about 19 and the therapist was like, he like did some astrological workup on me, even though he was a psycho analyst. And he was like, stop trying to understand Chris. You got the best and the worst from both of you. I was very arrogant. I looked down on people. I looked up to people. And that's one of the worst qualities that you can have. And I met some interesting people that saw me for who I was and thought that I had a good way about me and a good personality, but I had no sacrifice in me. I had no fortitude. And, I didn't have the ability to see uh, the things that were harming me and the self-destruction. Yeah, and the ecstasy and going to the clubs in the city, traveling to far off places to play in poker tournaments like in Russia and going down to South Beach and going to LA and going to Cancun. It was just life was one big party and I wasn't going to be told what to do. I thought that taking my will back was freedom essentially. And I had no idea about like what it meant. Like I lived in self-will, right? Like absolutely lived in self-will and I thought it was freedom. Nobody was going to tell me what to do. Oh, I'm going to drive to South Beach. Okay, let's get in the car. Let's get as much ecstasy and alcohol and weed and pills as possible because I just needed to be high. But that I thought that's the way life was supposed to be. And I was just a scared little boy covering up all of those things that I was chasing. And so my collegiate career was non-existent after dropping out of community college and realizing that like it just wasn't for me. And so I had no focus and it was charming at the time. As you know, we can be charming and manipulative and we can be a good time. And I was, basically everybody's best friend and life of the party. And that just ran thin. I identified with wanting to drink myself into oblivion and not care about my well-being. Had no idea that I was healing such a soul sickness. And I did that many, many times, vomiting blood. I'd have girlfriends, they were like, I don't even know what to do with you. Like, should I call an ambulance? I was the guy who would get up on the bar and, take his clothes off. And I got caught up in dating a lot of different dancers and that kind of nightlife. And I met, people who were like editors to Vanity Fair magazine and wanted to take me away to Manila and buy me clothes and sell me stories about David Geffen he already looked at your pictures and he wants to meet you. How do you think Brad Pitt and Keanu Reeves and River Phoenix got famous? And I was, fed all that stuff. I was caught up in that culture in the 90s. And in the club scene, it was like the heyday. It wasn't Studio 54, but it was like our version of it, and the Sound Factory. And that was just, it wasn't like dive bars and it hadn't progressed to that point. And I couldn't control what I was taking. Whether it was ketamine or Coke or X, I had to have it all. And some of it kind of neutralized each other, but it didn't matter. I didn't have control over it. And basically, that, went on for a long time. I was on a plane ride with one of my friend's sons, and I was drinking on the plane, of course, and he looked at me and he was like, Chris, can you not drink? And I'm looking at him. It didn't really hit me that this 9-year-old who's now a doctor, I'm like, I couldn't stop for him, not even for the ride home. And I didn't realize it. And I had many, many moments like that where it just really like, borrowing money to pay gambling debts from people that I really cared for. And they basically didn't want to see me again until like I had paid it back. So, a lot of stuff that like burned my soul, that the only way to get by was to rationalize my existence and continue to feed and fuel my addictions one way or another. All the pipe dreams of being sold these stories of campaign for like Gucci underwear and find myself in some guy's apartment who just wanted to take advantage of me. And because I was comfortable in what sex. I wasn't gay, but and I wasn't going to let anybody take advantage of me. And this was before it really got out of control. But they were just selling me a story and pumping up my dreams. I got caught up with the snake oil salesman of the business, and then when I started to really, get involved with some serious drugs, I almost compromised myself in ways that I I didn't think I ever would. In any event, all that took place, and then it just left me with no place to go. And obviously, I knew AA existed. In the rooms of AA recovery. And at the time, I had this one thing about my life that was like allowing, not only was it kind of feeding and fueling my arrogance, and my ignorance, but God used it to give me something to live for. And that was something that I discovered within my own nature. And basically, that's a part of my story that I'm now able to live and realize and breathe life into it, and allow it to actually be something fulfilled. That is what I do today, and what I discovered even in the throes of my addiction, because I was born with a deviation in my body, in my hips and my pelvis, and my legs didn't ossify. It's kind of like a Forrest Gump story. They had like bars and braces on my legs. And as a child, because my legs didn't straighten out naturally, it was a very common practice. And I don't remember it. And I grew up a normal child physically and whatnot. But later in my late teens and my early 20s, while I was like, playing semi-pro football, and I was like a top-notch, golden boy trainer in New York City, head trainer in all the clubs, and thought my shit didn't stink, and we're partying with celebrities and doing that whole thing. And all of a sudden, my body just started to reject everything that I was doing. And now, first, it rejected the style of training, the traditional and conventional style of training. Then it rejected my lifestyle and my environment. And I was kind of left to like, and reduced to something that I didn't know how to reconcile with, because all my contemporaries at that age were, looking good and feeling good, and nobody was suffering from the same thing that I was. And so that sent me, I like went to the Omega Institute up in Rhinebeck, New York, and took a Tai Chi retreat. I read books on Eastern philosophy and all this stuff, and, the healing power of macrobiotic diets. And at the same time, I'm drinking and I'm smoking and I'm doing drugs and I'm partying. And I'd find myself like in Central Park running barefoot at 6 o'clock in the morning. And, like these two forces. And people who knew me on the outside, that whole Jekyll and Hyde, they would never imagine that I partied the way I partied, because the other side of me was compulsively striving for this perfect idea of being healthy, while I was dealing with this genetic predisposition that had come to roost and caught up with me and clashed with the modern lifestyle. And I didn't know what to do. So I'm drinking and I'm drugging, and now my body's given out, and I'm trying all these things. And one day, God used my stubbornness. First discovery was that had pain and discomfort, and in my early 20s, and I said I shouldn't be experiencing this. And some days were worse than others. So I said, okay, I want to know what it would be like to not feel this discomfort at all, not even a low level of discomfort, right? I wouldn't accept anything. So I found myself lying on the floor in a fetal position, which ironically was where the malformation began. There was parts of me that didn't develop properly, and I'm lying in the fetal position, not knowing what I'm, unbeknownst to me at the time, I had stumbled upon this, had no idea what I was onto. And I'm lying there and I'm like, I can't believe I still feel discomfort in my knees. So I curl up a little longer, grab a pillow, and I sit there and I wait and I relax and I calm and I tweak my position. And I say, okay, finally, I feel zero discomfort. And I'm like, mother effer, what the heck? Anyway, so I get up from that and I walk away. And I'm still kind of like fuming that, like, what I've been reduced to and what's going on. And I'm baffled by it and all. And I'm like, wait a minute. I feel better. My body was looser. And I had a moment where just like my sense of well-being physically, I was very sensitive. It was extremely sensitive on a physical level. And I said, where is this coming from? What happened? What did I do? And I looked back at what I just did on the ground and I said, could that be? And I said, hmm. And so to make a long story short, that was the origin story of the protocol, which is what I teach. I went back there. And for 20 years, I went back there and back there and back there. And I let my body heal and heal and heal. And it all sprouted. It all evolved from there. And I had to, do a lot of trial and error and make sure that it was real and it was organic and it was coming from my physical nature and it had an element of geometry involved to make sure that it was all real. And it's like if you buy a book on the anatomy, they don't have Megan's anatomy or Chris's anatomy. It's called The Anatomy. And that is one book for 7 billion people, essentially. Men and women anatomically have some differences because of children bearing and whatnot. But so this system identified what binds us together. And then this system also equally acknowledges what separates us. And in the industry, we have a lot of one size fits all. And just like 12 steps, we align ourselves with it. The 12 steps bind us together, but the nuance and the experience is different for everybody. And our learning is quantified, based on our journey. So I truly feel that I discovered a blueprint within us for our bodies, no different than 12 steps have discovered for us spiritually. So now in recovery, I have, by the way, I came into the program in 2010, and I got sober in 2015. So I have a little over 10 years. But I was dying in the program because I did like the steps once over. I thought I was too cool for school, thought I had knew everything. And that was a big part of my lexicon. My arrogance and my ignorance is all coming full circle. I thought I knew everything. I wasn't consciously trying to act like an asshole, like an arrogant prick. I had lots of friends and I, got along with a lot of people, but there was no real depth to me. I didn't connect. I didn't know how to connect. It wasn't like, okay, if you stop drinking, great, or you get to a relationship, great, or you do this, great. But it's not about that. It's about staying in a relationship. It's about staying stopped. It's about really learning and really growing. And these are all the things that I'm learning as we speak. I took pride in not writing a 10 step, doing an inventory, a gratitude list. I took pride in not reading books because I knew everything. And so this friend of mine, he spoke and I wanted what he had and his energy was infectious and it was enthusiastic and exuberant. And that night he sent me his journal. And I look at this and God used my stubbornness again. He used my competitive juices again. And I go, F this guy. And I wrote something down for the first time in my life. I poured out my guts on paper, how I felt, because I couldn't admit to having a bad day. Prior to this, I couldn't admit to being stressed. I couldn't admit to being tired. I couldn't, so admit to drinking, yeah, but I couldn't admit anything else. And so when I sent back what I wrote to him, my sensitivity spiritually came on and I felt better. And I went, what? And you know what? I'm not going to cut my nose off to spite my face. And I haven't stopped writing ever since. It's taken a life all to itself, just like what I've done with the body. I'm sensitive physically. I'm sensitive emotionally, just as we all are. And I was able to latch on to that and set it in motion, let it create a life all to itself. And just that is my recovery. It just constantly grows in me because I'm shining light on the subconscious and I'm developing a framework so that I can align my will, God's will, with these principles and these virtues and all the beautiful things that I can see and that is emanating from you. I now feel like I've arrived and, now I feel like I'm part of the human race.
Wow. I have some follow-up questions for you. My first question, when I listened to your story, I noticed that you had quite a few like co-occurring addictions. You had mentioned the drugs, the alcohol, and also the gambling. So my question for you there is, how were you able to get sober from all three? Because I know gambling can be one of the hardest addictions to break.
Well, again, AA was the last house on the block. And I came kicking and screaming. I always thought I was destined because my father did get sober when I was 10 years old, so I knew of it. But to me, it was like high school all over again. It was like, wow, there's cute girls over there and can drink the coffee and eat the cookies. And I was real good at that. So once I got into the community of AA and the cliques and all this stuff, I identified with that and I wanted to be liked. And so that's what drew me in, but I wasn't recovering. So that's how that journey was taking place, but it took a long time for it to really penetrate. As I said, with the gambling, I was consumed by that as well. You talk about dopamine, and it's like, I can get dopamine from anything and I can chase almost anything and I want to put all those fires out. But with the gambling, I was rewarding myself with gambling. I was just switching addictions. It was no different than eating a pint of ice cream and smoking cigarettes or doing anything compulsively. Gambling did a great job of harnessing that energy. And it's just like anything else, it's never enough.
Yeah. Whenever you were in active addiction, did you ever have any large consequences from your actions?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I kind of scraped the bottom for a long period of time, not realizing how far down the scale I had gone. And so looking back, I realized how low my bottom was because again, like when I first came in and I was listening to stories, I was like, wow, that guy's got a really low bottom, amazing story. I'm like, maybe I should go out and do some more drinking and make my story crazier, like really sick stuff. And then I come to realize how crazy and low bottom my story was. So salvaging my salvation, salvaging my life with with changing. Everything in my subconscious is the matrix. It dominates me. I am a human being that is dominated by my unresolved trauma. And so the consequences for me and the rippling effect to others, consequences that are more meaningful, not being the center of the universe. I realize that like I'm not that big of a deal. Uh,
We think we're such an independent society, but really we're interdependent. And I think that's one of the lessons we learn in recovery. I wanted to ask when you finally were able to get that long term sobriety in 2015, what do you feel like that first year? What type of actions, habits, what kind of helped set you up for success that first year?
Well, my sponsor, he is a man that I respect and admire. When he sat in a diner with me and when my mind was elsewhere, he was going to be a mirror for me and he was going to suggest and teach me. And that's what did it for me was that individual. I had at least some good instincts to know that there was truth and value in what he was teaching me. And it hurt so bad to hear that truth and to see value in stuff that I had a very difficult time with, but that got me by.
Yeah. I love what you're talking about. I feel like I had a little bit similar of an experience. I knew recovery was starting to stick when I stopped talking and started listening in the rooms. I think I had this like chip on my shoulder and yeah, learning to listen instead of being like, well, I've got it figured out. It was life changing for me.
I mean, it all intertwines. And again, I'm not giving a symposium on this stuff. I'm just like, for myself. There's an art, a science, and probably a technology to listening.
Yeah.
Because the chatter, I'm listening, but there's a part of me that's not.
Mhm.
And that's what's going to ruin this connection. And so I have to put a lot of effort. I got to quiet that ego that thinks like that is not listening. And that's why like 11 step is a useful tool because I just want to listen.
Yeah. I have one more question before the lightning round. What would you say over the past 10 years is your biggest blessing that you've received?
Over the last 10 years, the biggest blessing is discovering journaling. 100%. I mean, and I also met the love of my life. No, I'm 51 years old. I'll be 52 in October. My fiance now, we got engaged recently, Samantha, she is younger than myself. And so I have a chance of having a family. I have a chance of doing everything that, I was the last of the Mohicans. I'm the only person that left that small town in Rockland County. They all married their high school sweethearts. They're all salt of the earth people. And I was, storming the earth. And now I have a chance. Journaling moved my vibration, created a vibration within me to move away from toxicity and to not keep feeding the other people that I was attracting. And, that's my part. And so the journaling, I literally knew what I didn't want, what I did want, my non-negotiables, and I started to uncover who Chris really was. And that was the most significant moment of my life is when I discovered protocol, understanding this healing modality, this universal healing modality that I help people with and I share it. And then the second was the journaling for sure. And then, of course, meeting the love of my life.
Yeah, that's a good list. We have made it to the lightning round of our show. It's a quick, fun get to know you because the listeners get invested in who you are when they listen to your story. So, the first question is you're given three options. You have to pick one. Would you shark dive, bungee jump, or skydive?
I've done 2 out of 3. I went scuba diving with sharks. And I loved it. I literally swam with them, so I couldn't believe it. Just miracle that that happened, that I was able to calm down, and I bungee jumped the worst bungee jump in Myrtle Beach. It was like off of a hotel, but it was a legit bungee jump. And skydiving, I was scheduled to do it in Australia, and we were doing so many things. That was the one thing we didn't get to do. So I am an adrenaline junkie, but I value my life today, and there's always a part of me that wants to push the limits, but I also want to be wise about my well-being and take care of myself.
Yeah, it's funny how life changes like that. Number two, you're in a simulation. Every time you walk into a room, the same song plays. What's your song?
Dum dum dee dum 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 dee dum dum. Is that a Rihanna song?
I think so. Yeah. Like
Th
early 2000s. Hmm.
Okay, I'll go with that.
That's a good one. I hadn't heard that one.
It
Number
just pumps me up.
Yeah, it pumps me up too. Number three, what's your favorite Disney movie?
The one where the kid, the inner space, where he got to feel all those emotions.
Well, Inside Out?
Inside Out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That one
I
was good.
I would say that one just because it was new to me to touch all those buttons inside of me.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much I didn't wanna feel in life. I wanna challenge myself and confront those fears as much as possible today.
Yeah. I love that. Number four, what is something you're obsessed with?
I am obsessed with healthy living, trying to crack the matrix. I'm a Libra, so like I'm kind of obsessed with balance and I want to try to crack the code. I want a healthy obsession. My work, I obviously want to be able to bring it to as many people as possible. I want it to be ubiquitous. I want it to be, mainstream and there are many stories of people being obsessed with their career, and I admire that. But sometimes there's a moral to the story. I want to have so much intrinsic value in my life that at the end of the day, I don't want someone to say, well, he should have done that. He didn't have his family and he strove too hard in one direction or another. But I need to continue to prioritize and do things systematically that will benefit my reach in the world, my slice of changing the world.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last question. What does freedom mean to you?
So now I know that it's willpower versus wisdom. And you're a power of example, the 12 steps, many people that I keep in my circle that I strive to be like in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not trying to keep up with the Joneses. I want to be who I am supposed to be, to not be afraid to be who I really am. I feel that where there's a way, there's a will. And so that means that I have to be a warrior doing the right thing. And that will give me ultimately my freedom to be unabashedly, with reckless abandon, who I really am.
Yeah,
So that's the freedom that I chase today.
I love it. I love to be a little recklessly optimist. Awesome. I can't thank you enough for coming on. Your story is going to help so many people. I mean, super interesting story. Your life was like, if you look at it like a choose your own adventure book, I mean, your life could have gone so many different ways. And I think the chapter that you got to and the ending that you chose, or I guess you could say the beginning, is a really cool place to be. It sounds like your life is going in a really cool trajectory, and I'm happy for you.
Thank you so much. I feel that way as well. I really do. And there's nothing better.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so nice meeting you. Have a good
Yeah,
night.
you're a light. You really are a light. And keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a good night.
Okay. Take
Bye.
care. Bye, Megan.